United States' attitude towards Ukraine since President Trump took up office in January 2025 has been extremely hot and cold, and mostly pretty cold. And the US has been saying to the Europeans, look, why should we pay to defend Ukraine? It's nothing to do with us. We don't care who wins this war. In my view, a completely wrong assessment. But the US have really thrown down the gauntlet to the Europeans to defend Ukraine with our own resources. And I think the UK has really taken a political lead on this.
Volodymyr Zelensky has been visiting the UK today as Andy Burnham's first international visitor since he became Prime Minister. The UK's PM had this to say after his meeting with Ukraine's president.
Overall, it was a very warm meeting. I thought I would get on well with him, and I did. We got on very well indeed, and this is going to be a close partnership. I intend to visit soon, and we will build this, and we will work through the different issues that President Zelensky has, many of which we've gone into today.
The two leaders have visited a naval base in Portsmouth where they addressed Ukrainian military personnel, and the Ukrainian president expressed his gratitude.
Our relationship with the UK is stronger than ever, and I thank Andy for his commitment to this partnership and for giving so much attention to defense and to our security. And defense and security are never just words. When a country invests in defense and invests in security, cities like Portsmouth, local communities, ports, and shipyards become stronger and stronger. They grow, they matter more.
Zelensky talking to and about Andy Burnham there today. Let's speak now to Leigh Turner, former British ambassador to Ukraine and author of Lessons in Diplomacy, Politics, Power and Parties. Good evening, Leigh.
Evening, Olly.
Hi, thanks for coming on so late at night. What did you make of today's meeting?
Well, I thought it went pretty well. In a way, getting President Zelensky over here and expressing support for Ukraine is a pretty easy win for Andy Burnham. He's not famed for his iron grasp of foreign policy, and nor should he be, actually. He doesn't have that much experience in this area. But he seems to have built a good connection with Zelensky. He had some good announcements to make. This stuff about the Stone Cloak electronic jamming system. That was a piece of good news. This is a kind of drone protection electronics package that the UK has developed, in which we are allowing the Ukrainians to build under license. We had this announcement that Andy Burnham hopes to go to Ukraine soon. And of course, we had this very interesting comment by the Prime Minister saying the UK would support a ceasefire and negotiations which must have Ukraine at the table and a strong voice for Europe too. Now, that last little bit he didn't have to say, but he did say it. And it all points to a good start for the Prime Minister in building up his foreign policy portfolio with a good meeting with Zelensky on Ukraine.
But that groundwork was done through Starmer's coalition of the willing, wasn't it? I mean, is there any difference, do you think, between Burnham's position and Starmer's, or indeed between Burnham's and Johnson's and Truss's and Sunak's?
Well, it is absolutely traditional that in most areas of foreign policy, we have a cross-party consensus. There's a few exceptions, such as Brexit, but if you look back over the years, things like the Falklands, when Michael Foot actually stood up and supported Margaret Thatcher in the House of Commons, almost unthinkable events. It is pretty standard that foreign policy doesn't change because British interests don't change. And the argument that it would be catastrophic for UK security for Russia to win its war of conquest in Ukraine has been pretty much accepted by all parties. And I would say pretty much accepted by a good proportion of the British public. But I think the real challenge for the Prime Minister now is going to be building a consensus that spending more money on the defence of Ukraine and on the defence of the United Kingdom too is a good investment at a time when money is inevitably and as always very tight, and doing that in the long term will be a real challenge.
Yeah, you mentioned the Stonecloak electronic warfare system, which we handed over the intellectual property to today.
Yeah.
That surprised me because of what you're saying, because of spending on defence, and we're being told we're not spending enough. I didn't think we had anything worth handing over, and Ukraine were the experts on drones, but it appears on drone jamming we are ahead.
Yeah, well, you're right. It's a two-way street here, and Ukraine, with its extraordinary degree of military innovation, has been really taking the fight to Russia over the last 6 months. And Ukraine has been showing that it has the best long-range drones in the world. It has the best anti-drone systems in the world. And we can all learn from Ukraine. And I must admit, I don't know about you, but I'd never heard of Stonecloak until today. Maybe that's because it's very secret. But there's a few things changing here, Ollie. I mean, we have this sign of Ukraine striking deeper into Russia. And we see protests in Russia about energy costs and internet blackouts and so on. A second thing we see is that pro-Trump US influencers such as Laura Loomer. Now, she's not a well-known name in the UK, but she's very significant in the US. She's one of the core MAGA people who really supports President Trump. And she's been an arch critic of Ukraine for years. And now suddenly this month, she's shown up in Ukraine saying, I was wrong all along. We should support Ukraine. That's a complete turn up for the books. And then we had President Tokayev of Kazakhstan, another Putin ally, who called on Putin this month to stop the war. First time he's said that so explicitly. So there's lots of developments here that suggest things are going a bit worse for Russia than they have been in the past. And there's a bit of a head of steam building up here. It doesn't mean that Ukraine's about to win this war. It's still under enormous pressure, but they're useful straws in the wind, I think.
And as a former British ambassador to Ukraine, how important is Britain's support in Ukraine to ordinary Ukrainians? I understand that Boris Johnson's stand initially must have been tremendously important, but we're quite a few years on from that now. Do they care what Andy Burnham says?
Well, it's all part of the same thing, I think. The big challenge here, Ollie, is the United States. And the United States' attitude towards Ukraine since President Trump took up office in January 2025 has been extremely hot and cold, and mostly pretty cold. And the US has been saying to the Europeans, look, why should we pay to defend Ukraine? It's nothing to do with us. We don't care who wins this war. In my view, a completely wrong assessment. But the US have really thrown down the gauntlet to the Europeans to defend Ukraine with our own resources. And I think the UK has really taken a political lead on this. And thanks in part to UK support, other countries such as Germany, the Baltic states, Poland, Scandinavians, and France have also formed an important part of this kind of coalition of the willing, so that even if US support is not forthcoming, Ukraine still has a chance of winning this war. And if the US were to up their support to Ukraine, that could make a real difference too.
And far be it from me to end on a facile point, Leigh, but I can't help noticing you're wearing a T-shirt with your blazer this evening, which of course is what Andy Burnham was wearing today and is often what President Zelensky wears. It seems like a silly point, but do you think actually it was visually quite interesting, wasn't it, that they were both sort of relatively smart casual? Do you think that might lend itself to some connection between the two?
Yeah, well, it's the first time that Andy Burnham has followed my fashion guidance, I must say. I know what you mean. I noticed that too. And of course, we had that infamous meeting in the White House in February 2025, where a journalist, a pro-Trump journalist, attacked Zelensky for not wearing a suit, a bizarre piece of international diplomacy. And I thought it was interesting that Andy Burnham was kind of slightly dressed down for the occasion and matching President Zelensky. And I kind of respect that diplomacy is all about building relationships. And as I say in my book, actually, the time to build a relationship is before the crisis. and you need to find common ground. You need to find mutual understanding, so that when the real crisis hits, I'll put that politely, when the crisis hits the fan, you have the relationship ready-made and ready to go. And so if Andy Burnham is trying to match his wardrobe to President Zelensky, I'm sure that their offices will have talked in advance. That's a very good thing as far as I can see.
All right. And that book is Lessons in Diplomacy, Politics, Power and Parties. Thanks, Leigh.
Great. Thanks very much, Olly.
Leigh Turner there, former British ambassador to Ukraine.